Time doesn't erase murder. It just hides it better. They said the case was closed. They said no one was watching. But someone always is. This is Santana True Crime.
Welcome to Santana True Crime. Tonight, we've got another interesting case, the Liz Barraza case. This is the third time that we've covered this case, and for a good reason. Questions keep on emerging, and I want to keep searching for answers, so I brought on someone that did a three-part series. She's a former member of the FBI Behavioral Analysis Unit, also the host of The Consult, Julia Cowley. Julia, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me back. Good to be here.
So again, if you want more information on this case, you can check out The Consult. There's a three-part series, very detailed, as all of her shows are. But I want to start out with, this video is online, and I'm sure you've watched it several times. When you're watching that and you're watching the suspect murder Liz in the fashion that they did, I say they because we don't know if it's a he or a she, is there anything that you can take away from the way that she was murdered?
It's very cold and callous. And while it's not good quality video, you know what you're seeing, and it's horrifying to watch one person take another person's life in that way, even though you don't see anything necessarily gruesome because it's at a distance. It's somewhat dark out, not the best video quality, but it's just horrible to watch. And I watched it many times because I know there's a lot of different interpretations of what we're seeing, but it seemed to me to be very targeted. This didn't appear to be an interaction that escalated to murder. The offender, what it looked like to me at least, the offender intended when they got there to go kill her. And that decision had already been made. This wasn't a decision that was made after an interpersonal interaction that went wrong, or an escalation or a fight or anything like that. This was a cold, calculated, targeted murder. That's what I took from the video.
Is there anything that would lead us, if this is a male or a female, just by the use of the firearm, it being close range, the type of murder that is?
I don't think you can necessarily read a lot into it. What I tend to look at, and I did watch the video, and I know some people are speculating that it is a woman. I cannot tell. It does look to me that the person has longer hair or is wearing a wig and maybe wearing some kind of coat and some boots. And so, but I have seen so many different videos in my career and have realized that I'm not really good at interpreting things. And ultimately, when you think you see something, or your colleagues see something, or other investigators, it might turn out to be something different. So I really don't necessarily trust myself all the time when you have such a poor quality video and it's still in night vision and colors are off and you're just not seeing it in a lot of clarity. So I don't want to try to determine if it's a male or female just by that video. What I want to look at too is statistically. And when we look at statistics, when a woman is killed, it's more likely, overwhelmingly, by a man. And men are responsible for more murders than women. So statistically, the precedence is set that she was most likely killed by a man. And men are most likely to use firearms. I mean, these are just sort of known statistics in homicides. So because I don't think the video itself gives us enough information to make a determination on gender, I think we have to default to it's most likely a man who killed her. And in this case, because we do have this what appears to maybe be longer hair and maybe be some kind of robe or coat and some boots, then you certainly wouldn't rule out a female offender. So I guess that's as careful as I can say it. But our determination on our show when we reviewed it was that it was most likely a male. And they had a lot of confidence
Right.
with that.
One of the things I noticed too, and
it.
maybe this is just me reading into things, is that it appears from the video that the offender is using one hand to shoot.
Yes, it does appear that
And
way.
I mean, it's a 380, so that's a small firearm, but still, I would, just from my experience with being around different types of shooters, women tend to hold the gun with two hands. And I don't know if that's just me reading into it or what. But
I mean, that's anecdotal, and
Right.
I think we all bring our own interpretations and our own experiences when we evaluate things, and so I think that's just as valid as any other type. Somebody may say, "Well, I've know a woman and she always only shoots one-handed." You never know, but
Right.
there did appear to be confidence, one-handed shooting. It appeared the other hand at some point extended out, but it's just so hard to tell exactly what was going on. And
Yes,
then, of
and one of the
course oh,
one
go
of the
ahead.
theories is that the offender was handing her a note.
Yes, I've heard that theory.
And I don't know if that's true or not. That's just what's floating around. But we do know that the offender fired 3 shots. Would something like that provide us any information about what type of person this is? Especially the offender fires, I believe the first shot, correct me if I'm wrong, went through her neck, and it actually strikes the house. You can see it in the doorbell video if you watch that in the
Mhm.
upper part. And then the offender shoots her again, and then when she falls to the ground, they fire one more time.
Right, the coup de grace, as we call
Right.
it. Yep.
Would something like that provide us any information about this offender as far as um, any type of profile that you would be able to, or part of a profile that you'd be able to give us on that?
Sure. I mean, I think they're comfortable using a gun. I don't think this is the first time they've used a gun, and maybe not even the first time they've actually shot this gun. I'm not saying they've committed a murder before, but they were very comfortable with extreme violence, extreme violence. They escalated directly to deadly force, and they had no problem standing over a dying woman and shooting her once again in the head, the face, to ensure she was dead. That takes a very cold and calculated person in possible anger, possible revenge. They were very determined and they were very comfortable with this type of violence against a young woman. So that tells us a lot about them. And while it doesn't necessarily tell us an exact motive, it tells us that there was a plan in place and there was a reason that developed. This motive wasn't just made up on the fly, or they didn't make that decision based on their interaction with her. And I don't believe this was some kind of robbery gone wrong or anything like that.
Right.
They went there to kill her. They were on a mission. So they made that decision prior. So they have prior knowledge of her. And so those are things we can take away from what we see in that video. And, I don't think I'm saying anything that's groundbreaking in this case. it's, to me, just very clear. And I think to anyone who sees it, and I think that's why the video, even though it is poor quality, why it's so disturbing, because you don't actually see clearly the violence, but we know what's happening and we know how horrible it is. And it takes a very specific kind of person to be able to do something like that, particularly when she didn't do anything. There was no argument, there was no fight, there was nothing. And it appeared to me that there was no recognition on her part that she knew this person. I know we can't hear what's said, but there also doesn't really seem like this person, she recognized the person. It just comes across, and I could be wrong, but there didn't seem to be a recognition on her part that she knew them.
And my thought on that was, if this person was wearing a wig and it's kind of, the lighting's dim, I don't know if she couldn't see the person's face clearly.
That's very
And
possible that they were wearing a disguise because
right,
they knew they had to wear a disguise. But what's interesting, I mean, if they're wearing a disguise, the disguise is not, maybe it is a disguise to get close to her
right.
because they don't want, but it doesn't matter, like, if she recognizes that person, because they're going to kill her. So she could recognize that person. So if they're wearing a disguise for Liz's benefit, they likely had an issue with her already, or they knew Liz had an issue with her, and they knew they wouldn't be able to get close enough to her if Liz recognized that person. That's one reason for a disguise. The other reason is because possibly, and maybe Liz didn't know this person or wouldn't have recognized this person, but then you wear the disguise because you could potentially be caught on a camera. Those are the two reasons that I can think of to wear that disguise. Because why do you need to hide your identity from the person if you can walk right up to them and just kill them? Why wear it?
Right. And another piece,
unless they know you and they know they're going to try to get away from, like, oh no, there's that person I'm having a problem with, I'm going to run back in the house.
right.
So it was maybe a way to ensure they could get close enough to her to ensure they could kill her.
Did you notice where the offender parked?
I did, yes.
Okay. Have you ever heard of stopping short? Like,
Yeah.
okay. So like when police are going to your house, we don't pull up directly in front of your house.
Right.
Right. And then we
we do. Like if we're doing a search warrant or something,
all right.
we always would pull up in people's drive and we get right out and go to the door. Yeah, we didn't
Oh my
necessarily.
gosh. We were told not to do that. So it's an officer safety thing. You stop short and then you walk up kind of on the side. You never walk in front of the house. And the reason for it is that way the person's not going to see you.
Well, I guess it
buys
depends
you a
on
little time.
the situation too, and who, what you're
This was just
intending
like
to
what
be
was
there
passed
for.
down to me, right? So, but that's what reminded me of that, is when the offender does do they drive by the house and then they flip around. But the way that they parked, and again, this could mean nothing. Maybe it was just a good part on the street. This is a crowded area, but it did kind of remind me of, okay, this is something like we would do. Not to say this person's a police officer or has any training, but when I saw that, I was like, oh, that's why they're doing that. So they can walk up on her. Because if you just pull right into the driveway, then she may recognize that vehicle. And as soon as the person pops out of the car, they're going to be in the light.
I mean, it's the same idea of why they wore a disguise. They could get closer to her. So, like you said, if the truck pulls up, she recognizes that truck and she knows that who drives that truck, the person who drives that truck, she has a problem with, or they have a problem with her, and she is going to retreat into her home. So it's very possible they park so she can't see the truck, and they're in a disguise, and they can get this ensures they can get close enough to her to ensure they can kill her. Because I don't see the point of a disguise
Right.
otherwise, other than you're conscious of there's maybe some cameras in the neighborhood.
Well, and this is what kills me about this case is this is a very populated area. I'm going to put this up and we'll talk about it in a little bit. This is a path that the suspect used to leave. But I mean, these houses are extremely close together. And we know from the call logs that there's people outside. So I don't see of how it's a lot of risk, I feel like, if you're trying to murder Liz, you've got to have a lot of hate in your heart to be able to risk that much to do this at shortly before 7 o'clock in the morning, or right before 7 o'clock. You wait until Sergio leaves, but I mean, this is time people are waking up and leaving for work. So,
But the offender's perception is that this is the ideal time. So why is that? That's what you have to ask. Like, why is this the ideal time? Well, they know Sergio will not be there. They know she will not be at work. She will be there alone in the driveway. It's an ideal time for them. Maybe their schedule works out better, that no one will recognize that they're missing or gone for a period of time. I mean, I think that the time is chosen. Yeah, it seems high risk to us, but for whatever reason, this was the ideal time for the offender.
the other thing that you've, when I was listening to your show, again, The Consult, go check it out. You were talking about something that I hadn't heard, and that is that at some point, Liz's office, someone fired a shot into it.
So yeah, that information we were that has not been confirmed. Don't know by police. Maybe it has, but Mike Morford from Criminology, who joined us on the show, he said that was discovered by Paul Holes when he was investigating the case, and Paul is retired from Contra Costa County in California, and he worked on the Golden State Killer case. And that was something he learned about, that there had been a shot fired at some point at her building.
Well, let me ask you this. Do you think this was the first attempt that the offender made to kill Liz, or has this been something that the offender may have stalked her, may have tried to find the right opportunity and something, maybe Sergio's there, or is this something that because the timing cannot be coincidental. You've got this yard sale, you know that she's out. They waited literally until Sergio is gone. As soon as his van clears the neighborhood, they're coming in.
Right.
They're not waiting half an hour or anything like that for him to be across town. Right?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, they definitely had knowledge of their routine and what was going to happen that day.
So with cases like this, would this be something where they, I hate to say got it right, but this was the first time that they did it, they planned it out, and they executed their plan? Or do offenders like this have multiple attempts that fail and we just don't recognize those because they're not caught?
I'm not aware of cases where there were multiple attempts. I think that if somebody had been stalking her or had attempted to take her life, she would know that. There would be something that she would have been concerned about. And there's nothing to indicate that she felt she was being followed or stalked, or that anyone had attempted to harm her prior to this. There's just no information about that. And I'm not aware. I can't think of a case that I've ever worked on that there were multiple attempts. I mean, I'm sure there are cases. I'm not saying that they're not. I just haven't worked on one where there were multiple attempts. I think the person had a good plan, and because of that, they were very effective and very efficient in executing the plan to a point, because I think at some point there is a little bit of a change in the plan when they're trying to leave the neighborhood and they turn around. So that didn't go to, but it also shows they can adapt well under a high stress situation and continue to execute their plan in a successful way. But there did seem to be possibly something that altered the offender's plan slightly, and which is why I think they turned around and went back by the house.
So, you know what? Let's talk about that because I've got some questions about this too. So, this is a map for those that are listening. I just put up. The offender starts to leave the neighborhood, and then for I can assume that either they're hearing sirens, they saw someone, something makes them turn around and go back into the neighborhood. And that's where the offender passes Liz's house again. Some people have the theory that they wanted to make sure that Liz was dead. I don't really buy that personally. Do you have any thoughts on that?
I don't. I mean, they made sure she was dead when they shot her directly in
That
the
was
head.
my thought.
They knew that she was dead.
Right.
There's no doubt, and it's so high risk. Why do that? Why? Oh, did I really kill her? They knew they killed her. They are skilled at what they did, and that was why they stood over her and did what they did, because they wanted to ensure it and they knew it. So I agree with you. I think they were attempting to leave the neighborhood and they saw the sirens, I think likely, and turned around and had to go back by. Very high risk to do that, but they were concerned enough they felt they had to. And it gives another opportunity for a witness to see the truck and for the pass by the cameras. It's just something you would never do after you've just murdered somebody, is go back by there like that, particularly when it was carried out to begin with so efficiently. So
Right.
something changed and altered them, or altered what they initially planned to do.
Yeah, and this is supposedly the another map that shows the police response in the yellow. So the police kind of come down two side streets, which would make sense why the offender decides to turn around in the blue for those that are watching and goes down a neighborhood street, okay, that comes out into a cul-de-sac. And at the end of the cul-de-sac, sorry for swatching.
What's the red there? What's the red? You have the
Over
red
here?
and the blue.
Sorry.
Yeah, the red.
All right. So the red is the initial, the offender left Liz's house.
Okay.
Okay. And was
got it.
leaving out of the neighborhood. The yellow is the police response. So these are the paths that the patrol cars took to enter into the neighborhood. And then the blue is the offender's, after the offender does a U-turn. So coming out of the neighborhood. So this is a long, for those that are listening, this is a very lengthy or large neighborhood that's heavily populated. The houses are close together. I'm sure that you're passing lots of cameras at the time. And actually at the bottom of my screen here, there is a house that has a camera that actually captured the vehicle going into this cul-de-sac. And then from there is when we lost track of it. So the assumption by some is that they popped between the two houses and got on this green space and then took it back to the main highway.
I believe that's what the police think happened.
But the problem is the email that I saw from Sergeant Ritchie is that they never found any tire marks or anything that would confirm that actually happened. And so
I can't explain it, but if they're coming in both those directions, then the car would keep going, because if they take a left to try to head out, they're still going to run into law enforcement. So they keep going. They don't
Right.
ever come back out. They either parked somewhere and parked
Yeah.
a truck in a garage that never came out again, or they left either by that route, or I don't know if there's another possible way they could have gone off road.
Well, the other possibility that I thought of is you've got this adjoining neighborhood. So it's like, what says this person can't take a right and then pop into this neighborhood? And I wonder if that neighborhood was ever canvassed.
Up, you mean up there, a little bit higher there on your map?
Yeah.
Or
So if the vehicle comes out here where this blue arrow is and
mhm.
would make a left, is what the popular theory is, right? But there's no actual tire marks or anything like that that they were able to find where the vehicle would have driven between a house. And I'm not saying that didn't. I'm just saying they didn't see anything that day to be able to say, like, yes, this is the path of the vehicle. Um,
So you're
if-
thinking up a little higher? No, because they passed a camera a little more
right. So
south
I'm
there
thinking
too.
if this
So
person did go in between these houses, one of these houses in this cul-de-sac, the option is to make a left and go to the highway, or make a right and dump into this neighborhood.
I mean, yeah,
Right.
either is a possibility.
And so my another question I had was, did that adjoining or next door neighborhood, was that canvassed for cameras as well? And I know that's something that I haven't seen any information that it did. I don't know if they've done it since then, but
I
we
don't
do
know.
know that they canvassed that street for businesses with cameras.
Right.
And my understanding is they actually did not capture the truck on any camera, and some of those cameras were not working, which always happens. Or the reports that I have, the employee did not know how to work the security software, which is also a very common issue. And I cannot say for certain if they have video or not. Hopefully they do.
hmm
Have you heard anything about them actually having a video or a picture of this truck after it leaves the neighborhood?
No.
Okay. I wanted to talk about something that you do a fantastic job on in your show, and that is the victimology aspect of this crime. And a lot of times you talk about if this person is high risk or low risk. Can you explain what those parameters are and what you would put Liz into?
So we're looking at a person's daily routines, their habits, their relationships that they're in, their employment, every aspect of their life, and we're looking for things that might elevate their risk. So, for example, if they're involved in criminal activity, that would elevate their risk. If they are involved in an extramarital relationship, or they're involved with someone who's involved in an extramarital relationship, like their spouse or their significant other, that elevates risk. So we're looking for those things. They're involved, if they abuse alcohol or drugs, things like that. If there could be situational times where you're normally low risk, but because you're walking down a street late at night all by yourself, your risk is elevated because of that. So it doesn't mean that you were specifically targeted. It just means you put yourself in an environment which it elevated your risk, and there was somebody that was assessing you as a victim, and they're looking at you know availability, desirability, and vulnerability, and those are kind of the criteria. And so that's what we're looking at, every aspect, financial aspects. We're looking, and it's in victimology is, I think it is something that really does get overlooked in a lot of investigations, because people don't want to come across as blaming the victim, like asking these tough questions, personal questions about a victim that sounds as if you're victim blaming. And that's not why we ask the questions. We ask the questions so we can know as much about the victim as possible. Because the more you know about your victim, the more you know about your offender. And so trying to determine what areas of Liz's life, specifically Liz, what areas could have elevated her risk. And ultimately, we thought from what we knew, what we had available, and it really does seem that the investigation has borne out this way, that she was extremely low risk. She was a low risk victim. She had a nice personality and people liked her, and she had a stable job, and she was married, and there are no indications of infidelity on her or her husband's part. There didn't seem to be any financial trouble. There was no signs of being in debt or gambling. Their digital devices were thoroughly examined. There was nothing that indicated that they had problems in their marriage. And of course, and I say that because obviously Sergio, the husband, is going to be the number one suspect. And from there, you kind of start to expand out from him because he's her husband. And so there's just nothing to indicate that he would have had a motive to kill her. And I'm not saying he didn't. I'm saying that no one's ever found a motive for him to kill her. And nobody ever found that they had any significant issues in their relationships. Nobody ever found they had any kind of financial issues or debt. They weren't involved in abusing alcohol or illicit drugs. They weren't interacting with criminals. They had stable employment. I mean, just very low risk. They were they had fairly routine life, structured, and that's an area where it could be elevator risk if you're structured, because if someone intends to kill you, they know where to find you. So sometimes you kind of have to look at, well, they may have these very low risk behaviors, but if there is someone who wants to kill them, they'll know. I know their schedule. I know where I can find them, and I can choose the opportune time because they are so routine and structured. But generally, she was low risk. We have never, in all the research that we did and the information that has come from the investigation itself, there was just nothing. There were possible indications that she might have had, or there might have been some issues with some people in the Star Wars group. But that's about it.
Yeah, and that's what's so odd. In the Star Wars group, the 501st, they get dressed up, they go to children's hospitals and do charity events. And that's why I'd heard too, is that I've seen text messages that Sergio has sent some people, and he's talking about this. And the conflicts that were going around were not major conflicts. It was just more or less petty differences that they had about the Star Wars group, from my understanding. And I don't know if it was petty on the surface for everyone and someone
Right.
took that, because I mean, people are intense about this stuff. This is not like buy a cheap costume at Party City and show up to a kid's costume party. This is them buying professional costumes. And I know that one of the conflicts surrounded that Sergio and Liz had taken on leadership positions in the 501st, and some people disagreed with the policies that they were implementing. That sounds like my son used to do Boy Scouts, and there was some minor bickering sometimes between the adults about what should happen and what not, but no one went and killed someone over it, right?
Right. But people who are petty,
Right.
who get easily aggrieved, and they can ruminate about things. They are overly sensitive. They feel that they, real or perceived, they feel they're being wronged. And that's the kind of person that could escalate to murder. It may seem like this is a very petty
Yes.
disagreement, but people who become really petty like that become very angry, and sometimes they become obsessed with those petty grievances, and they are sensitive people, and those sensitive people often think that things are being done to them personally that really aren't. And I think we can't I don't think we can discount somebody who we interpret had a grievance that just didn't seem like that nobody would murder over that. You really have to examine that person's personality to make that determination. We wouldn't murder somebody over a disagreement in a Star Wars, club where we didn't like the leadership decisions. That would not bother us. But if somebody is a very sensitive person who gets easily upset and angry, like, well, if I was running it, I could do this, and they feel that they're entitled and they should be listened to, and if that's not happening for them, they can very well form a grievance, and that grievance can build and build over time, and they can ruminate about it. And so somebody like that, and I'm not saying that this happened, I'm just saying it's something I can't discount, that something that seems like it's not a big deal didn't become a big deal to somebody. But we would need to know each and every person's personality, like these people that had these grievances, who's the type of person that doesn't let things go, who's the type of person who can't be talked down, who can't be reasoned with, who, those are the very dangerous people. When you try to reason with somebody and they will not, you cannot back them off that grievance. And it becomes a point where for them, violence is the only answer. And again, it seems like that is just not a motive for murder. It's, the typical motives for murder are money and love and revenge and all of that, that seem like, well, we can all understand that. But maybe, somebody, and I don't know that this happened, but the person's like, they put this policy in and I hate that policy. And that just really upset this person. And maybe they tried to talk to them and they're like, nope, we're in charge now. This is how we want to run it. And this person became really angry. So I think it's more important to not put our judgment on what would drive someone to murder and really look at the different personalities that are involved. Like, who can't let things go? Who said things like, in this particular case, if there is somebody either in this group or at her place of employment, I think we would have seen what we call leakage, where people are angry and talking about, the person's angry and talking about like things, and they would have been upset prior, and people might know that that person had a problem, but they might dismiss it like it's not a big deal. That person, that's just how they are. But I think each individual, and starting with whoever they ever had an issue with, should be looked at very closely, and maybe like a personality assessment done on them.
And so the person that I know that Sergio had given the name to Sergeant Ritchie that they had conflicts with, he was described as having a short temper, that he owned a decal company, which was kind of unique because there are other vehicles of similar nature that are stopped, but they don't have the decal that has kind of eluded police when they're looking for this truck. Um, but the person was also 6'5", and so did not match the description from, if you're taking the video at face value. I don't know if there's been any study done on how tall this person actually is. But would someone like that, when you're talking about leakage, would they be able to hold that in and bottle that up and then it releases? Or is there, because you said also that they've looked at her social media accounts, at her devices. Would this be the type of person that would contact Sergio and Liz directly about things, or
Oh,
would
possibly. Yeah. I mean, that could be part of the grievance. I tried to settle it with them and they wouldn't listen to me. They very well could have, and they might not have as well. They might just feel, that they're being ignored, and what's the use in trying to reason with these unreasonable people? That might also be the case. So I don't know that we could say definitively. I think it would just be important to say, or important to just look at generally how not only that person but anybody else who might have had any kind of problems with her. And I would even just start like closest to her as well, not just people that we know had grievances, but looking at, did this person ever have a grievance, or did they ever show these signs of being or acting in a way that just seemed disproportionate to the situation. That's the kind of person you're looking for, I think. Somebody, because again, looking at Liz's life, and I think we can all say this about her. Her life, I think, they have gone over that with a fine-tooth comb. There is really no reason to have a motive to murder Liz Barraza. There's none that any reasonable person could see when scouring the details of her life. Nothing. So we are looking for that person who is unreasonable, who has issues with other people. Liz would not be the first person that this person would have an issue with. And we're looking for people who hold on to grudges and escalate to the point where violence does become the only answer. And I think this person is going to stand out and have other interpersonal issues with other people. This person may have contacted Liz and Sergio and tried to get their viewpoint across and get them to align with their viewpoint. And if that didn't happen, that could have made them very mad. As well as it could be, I'm not going to bother because I'm right and they're wrong. And so I'm just going to kill her. And that's how I'm going to solve the problem. So it's just really hard to say what the interaction was. I wouldn't be surprised if this person did have an interaction with her before. And, you can't rule out that a person, while this is statistically less probable, you can't rule out that a person who had the grievance had someone else carry out the murder for them.
And that's kind of my other question is that, do you believe that just one person was involved in this?
I have no information there's nothing that would suggest to me that there's more than one person, but it's because I don't know what I don't know, I guess is what I'm trying to say. But
you would be guessing.
Yeah, I'm not necessarily guessing. I'm just saying there's no information. There's nothing about the way the crime was carried out that tells me that a second person had to be involved. If there was something in the evidence or it's in the investigation that indicated, okay, one person could not have done this alone, then I would say, yeah, we could potentially be looking for another person or a co-conspirator or an accomplice of some kind. But statistically, when you have a homicide, it's overwhelmingly one offender. And so I can't say that it's more than one offender. And I don't think it's a guess. It's just an educated guess based on the research, based on experience, based on statistics. So it's most likely one offender. But
would you be able to put an age range with this offender as well?
Well, we're really careful with age, and usually we give pretty wide age ranges. But I would say that they are not a significantly amount younger or significantly amount older than either Sergio or Liz. I think they are somewhere in that age bracket somewhere, but not really much older or much younger. They're likely within the social acceptable range to be friends with. I think they're probably closer to being peers than not, just based on Liz's lifestyle and
So
who
the only other
she hung out with.
conflict that
Mhm.
sorry, the only other conflict that I saw in Liz's life was, if you even want to call it that, is that Sergio's dad was going through a divorce at the time, right?
Yes, and yes, that's part of what I know, and that he had maybe, or there were issues with finances and paying Sergio, because Sergio worked for him. So he was having financial difficulties. I understand that.
With Sergio's dad, when you're looking at that and understand that divorces are tough and there's a lot of stress, but again, like there's nothing that we can say that bled over into their relationship that you've seen.
No, no, doesn't mean it's not there. Just there's nothing that I've reviewed that I've
So we just
seen.
don't know.
Just don't know. I don't know how old Sergio's dad was at the time.
Yes.
How old was he?
I do not have that information. But I mean, I agree with you on the age thing. I don't think that this is an old man that ran up there and committed the murder. Maybe I'm wrong. Um,
I agree. I mean, I said earlier when we first started this, I don't really want to put too much weight into videos, but I will say I think the person was somewhat athletic.
right. I was
They
going to
they
say the same
they
thing.
turned and ran pretty
Yeah,
fast, and they were
they
pretty
didn't blow
confident.
a.
And
I would have blown my
no,
hamstring out if I did
they
that.
weren't. Yeah, they weren't. Yeah, exactly. They weren't limping. They weren't running slow. They turned quickly and ran quickly, and they looked somewhat athletic to me. And I don't see that being an older person or somebody who might be of larger stature. And just the way that they moved, they appeared to be on the leaner side. So I don't know what his size is, but I just don't think, I'm assuming he's middle aged. I i i don't think that's a middle aged. I don't think they're that old.
Right. I agree. I mean, you can see their legs when they're running, that they look very muscular and um or fit, I guess would be a better
Yeah, they do
term.
look fit. Yeah, I would agree.
So a lot has been put about finding the suspect vehicle, and the police
Yes.
did a stop
Mhm.
and actually sent you some information about that. But the crime occurred around 6:55. The police make the traffic stop. I believe they get behind the car at around 7:05, and they conduct the stop at 7:10. And the vehicle that they stop actually does not have the model decal that was correct for the suspect vehicle. It was a similar vehicle, but it wasn't what's it called? The Pro X model, I believe it's called.
Mhm.
When we're looking at moving this case forward, do you think that it's finding this vehicle? Do you think that more, you mentioned psychological evaluations, maybe some people that are connected to people? Like, what's the way that we can move this forward and get more answers, in your opinion?
And I can only speak to what I would do or what I think is important, and I can't say if I don't know if the police have done all this or not. I'm assuming they have, and but I would I mean, certainly the truck is important. I think we have to keep in mind though, and it's not something we said on our show, but as we're talking about a potential that the suspect is wearing a costume, not necessarily a costume, but a disguise of some sort.
Right.
That, who's to say they didn't put a fake decal on their truck or something, or try to, disguise the truck itself. I mean, again, why wear the costume and then just drive a very identifiable vehicle? So is it possible that it was altered and then immediately following the crime, they unaltered it? I don't know. I'm just speculating. I do think, finding that truck is very important. I don't know if, I think we said in the show, and I'm not like a car person. So I'm like, I don't know if looking at that particular truck, it is impossible for it to have been an earlier model. Like, I don't know, like maybe there's something that an expert in trucks, there's no way that is, a truck that is older than 2013. I don't know. So when we were talking about it on our show, and this would be something that I would also advise investigators, unless they told me it's impossible. It can't be a 2012 truck, or it can't be, it can't be 2009. It has to be, 2013 and newer. So I would expand that. I wouldn't focus so much on the decal. I mean, those can be removed. So those are the types of things that I would consider. And again, I'm not a car person, so a car and an expert in these trucks would say, that's all impossible. So the description of the truck is accurate. That is 100% accurate. Then I would say, okay, that's what you're looking for, and that's key then. And that would be great if it was 100% what they say in terms of the description of the vehicle. That's a good lead. And I think it's, a very important lead. And then again, going back to, obviously when you're looking at the people that are closest to her, like her family members, like Sergio, you're looking really more for the maybe more obvious motives. And so far that hasn't seemed to pan out. There's the finances, the infidelity, drug problems, gambling problems. None of that has really panned out. And you would want to do that for the people that are just very close to her, that might have very personal reasons to do that. And then as you expand out, then I would start really looking at the personalities of the people, certainly starting with anybody who had even the slightest issue at all with her, and looking not necessarily at the issue itself, but looking at them and finding out their history with people. And we do what we would do when we were really trying to develop. It's not necessarily a psychological profile of somebody, because we don't do that. We do a personality assessment of them. We have these questionnaires, and we would want, if investigators, as they're moving through potential suspects, have people that know that suspect fill out that questionnaire. And of course, you don't want, and that can be tricky, because you don't want the people that you're giving that questionnaire to tell the person, because you don't want them knowing that you're necessarily looking at them. But and then we would review those, and we'd be looking for the things that I had discussed earlier in this person's personality, because again, there's really no good reason that would jump out at you and me for Liz Barraza to be murdered the way she was murdered. She has this just very low risk for anyone, and people generally loved her, and she was well thought of and well liked, and she was productive, and she was kind and generous. And so there's really not a reason that jumps out. So you're looking at that person who has unreasonable behavior with people when it comes to their interactions with people in their lives. That's what you would be looking for. And you might be looking for things that seem pretty petty, but that's who you're looking for. You're looking for that petty person. And I don't like to use the word petty, because I don't want it to minimize what happened to Liz, because it's a horrible tragedy. But when the crime is solved and we find out the reason, I think we're all going to be thinking that is just such a waste of life, such a terrible, minuscule reason to take a life like that. I think that people are going to end up being very surprised. And I think we're going to have a hard time wrapping our head around what the real motive is.
Yeah,
If it's not Sergio, I should say. And I say that because, while I think he's been carefully and thoroughly investigated, he's the husband and he still has to remain a suspect until he can be completely ruled out. So I'm talking about these people that have this more of a relationship with her that's on the periphery.
Okay. So if you did have someone that had a hot temper that lived nearby and had conflict with Liz and owns a decal company and is known to own firearms, that would be, and someone was described as a douchebag, I believe was the quote that I got about the person, and is in the 501st, that would be someone that we should talk to?
Yes. Oh, yes, absolutely. And I'm sure that person has been talked to and I know other people have been talked to as well, but that's absolutely.
I'll send you the text messages after the show, just then you'll have
yeah.
them.
Yes, I would make that person a priority to discuss them. And I would also be, looking, really doing a very detailed background investigation on that person, because that's,
Right.
Yeah, until you can rule them out.
And it sounds
nobody
so
can be ruled
bizarre,
out
but
at this point.
right.
Yeah.
But you already said it, and a friend of mine, I'll call him a friend now, Alex Lewis. He's been looking into this case for a while. He's got a YouTube channel just on it. We talked about this with Amateur Sleuths, where some of his followers have even gone door to door and even found one of the videos that the police didn't have, and they provided that to the police, which is why we knew it went into that cul-de-sac. That was provided by him. And he even found on Google Earth, a picture of I do not know if this is a suspect vehicle or if it's the right model, but it's definitely a black Nissan Frontier, and that is a few doors down from Sergio's father's house. I don't know if it's a coincidence. We know that a vehicle was stopped shortly after. I'm sure this is Texas. There's a lot of vehicles out there, but I do think that these things need to be looked into.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, certainly. I mean, and I would think that they have been, because I had been told, I forget who told me, that almost every single person in the Star Wars group had been interviewed. So I don't know if that's true, but
Yeah,
when you say every single person, do you mean every single person, or do you mean the people that were at the meeting that particular day, or do you mean the people that are, the ones who've been in there the longest? I mean, I don't know what that means. Unless I were to see it, with my own eyes, every single interview with the person. But
I wonder how detailed these are too.
Well, exactly. That's the thing, is that you can interview somebody and you can, talk to them for a little bit and they seem fine and you don't really know. And that's when it comes down to, you really need to do a deep dive on these people. And that is, it's easy for me to sit here and say that. I can say that I don't have to go do the work, and I don't have 20 other cases I'm working on, so, for me to just say that, just go do a personality profile on all these people. That's really a lot of work. That's really hard to do. But I would do it systematically and start crossing off those people that kind of fit what we talked about first, and kind of keep working your way down until you find somebody. Okay, wait, this person kind of fits. They have access to firearms. They drive a similar truck, that kind of thing. Like, and, start talking to people around that person and see if they've ever been violent before, if they ever said anything about doing something to Liz, or is there somebody in that person's environment that they might tell or might assist them with this.
And I think that when we're looking at this group and we're looking at, and I'm not trying to disparage this group because I think that they do a lot of great charity work and stuff. And I've never been to one of these fantasy role playing meetings types of groups, but it reminds me of hearing stories about the crazy shit people used to do when they would get heavily invested in Dungeons and Dragons when I was a kid.
Mhm.
And you hear about these cases where people took a fantasy and just made that into reality and took things personal and uh, warped that line of like what was real and what was fiction. And I don't know if that was the case with this, where they saw Liz and Sergio getting into these leadership roles, and like you were saying, they just something that was petty or may have just been a slight comment. It just snowballed into a murder, which is crazy to think about, but
And I
that
need
does
to
sound like,
destroy the evil empire.
yeah,
I mean, these groups, these are very serious hobbies. And yes, they do a lot of good charity work, and most of the time, majority of the people are doing it for the right reasons. They're doing it because they first and foremost, they love Star Wars. They want to give back to their community. They want to have a good time. They want to socialize with people that like the same things as they do. And it's fun. But you can see how serious it's taken too. They put a lot of money and time and effort into their costumes, and they have to be approved. And this is a really big deal. This is a big part of people's lives. And yes, there could be an element that's within these groups that this fantasy, because it is, living out kind of fantasies, and your movie heroes or the villains, and you're playing them, and that's kind of it's a fantasy based type of hobby. And there are people that may take the fantasy a little too far. And that I don't want to say there's always, but in every type of group there's always a problem person who takes things a little too seriously or can't get along with other people. And and I think this is the kind of person that you might be dealing with in these groups. Like, I think that is very possible. And because even the people that are, the good people that are doing it for fun, they take it very seriously. This is important to them. And so then if you think about the one person who doesn't take things so well, and they get involved in this group, and the group isn't being run the way they want it to be run, and look, they're the evil empire. They're the ones trying to destroy us, and
oh yeah.
and then it becomes, you know, like you said, the fiction kind of blurs the reality. And
And what makes sense about that too is one of the theories, I don't know how true this is that, or if this will be true, is that the suspect was actually dressed up kind of like Princess Leia with the gown and the boots. And it's a grainy video and the hair is down. So I don't know where you get that, but that would make sense that this person may have dressed up like some type of Star Wars
yeah,
person
I
doing
that's that
this.
is I guess that's possible. Yes. but it's hard to tell. But I thought that I'm like, those look like stormtrooper boots, but I don't know. I mean, I'm
Right.
not. I like I said, I don't want to make a definitive decision about that on a grainy video like that when it just and when you're dealing with the lighting issues and the fact that it's still night vision and colors could look different in the in that twilight or is it twilight in the morning
It's like,
during that
yeah,
time
right.
when it's dawn, I should say, when dawn, it's kind of in that time where the cameras are kind of alternating between daylight and nighttime vision, and I think things can get thrown off. But yeah, to be honest, it looked like Star Wars boots to me.
With the
But
person's height, I don't know. I know this is not your expertise, but I'm
yeah,
gonna throw it out there anyway. Do you know if anyone has actually done any testing to determine what the height of the offender is?
no, I'm not aware of that. It
Okay.
doesn't mean it hasn't been done, but no. And I don't know how I I know the FBI does do things like that. They have experts that can do that kind of estimation. I don't know under the circumstances of this case if it's possible or what they could determine, but it would be something I'd be asking about anyway. As an investigator, I would say I would talk to an expert and say, is it possible to try to get height estimation based on the videos that we have? And, the experts would go out there and, take all the measurements and try to come up with their best estimation.
I know that the FBI is busy, but is this something that you think they could lend a hand in, or it would actually move this case forward if would the BAU even touch this since it's just
Yeah,
one murder, or
yeah,
how does that work?
yeah. They would.
If they were requested, they would?
Yeah, they would do it. Yeah,
Okay.
the BAU isn't limited. It's not just serial murder or
Okay.
mass murder. I mean, most of my cases were single homicides. So yeah, there's uh, a way to go through requesting. The police department or the sheriff's department can contact the local FBI office, and that FBI office can contact the behavioral analysis unit. They can get involved. And it's the same thing as well if they wanted any specialized laboratory services. So for example, the experts in the laboratory that could maybe do the height estimation, something like that, or at least try to make the determination if that can be done.
Gotcha.
And anything else, the FBI is available to assist the state and locals at their request if they don't have the resources. Now, that said, things can take longer if it's not an FBI investigation and it's not terrorism. So it's not a priority for the FBI because of those reasons. They have to prioritize, the higher priority investigations that the FBI is in charge of first before a state or local investigation.
Gotcha. All right. Well, I appreciate you coming on. I
Sure.
know that you've been working on the Jeffrey Dahmer episodes. I need to check that out.
We did a case study on Jeffrey Dahmer. I had a forensic psychologist join us so that we could kind of demonstrate the difference. And I even mentioned it today, the difference between behavioral analysis and psychological analysis and the different perspectives. And Jeffrey Dahmer was a really good case study because he was fairly forthright when he taught, and I say fairly because I don't believe he told the truth about everything, but he gave a lot of information to investigators, and he was also evaluated extensively. So we had access to all those reports. So he made a very good case study. So
Very
it
cool.
was interesting. Yeah, it was really interesting and horrifying, really. Just
Yeah. The
really, I mean,
Did you watch
Yeah.
that Netflix series on him?
Which one?
On that they did on
I
Jeffrey
don't.
Dahmer? This was like
Yeah, but
last year.
I'm not sure I did.
Oh my
I don't
gosh,
think
when
I
they were
did.
yeah.
I read all of his evaluations and his interviews and things like that. It's mostly I did the documents, but I listened to my son Jeffrey, and it's a podcast where they talk to some um, other victims, survivors of Dahmer's, and they talked a lot with his dad, or they had recorded phone calls between Dahmer and his father, and they were really, I thought they were fascinating. I thought, I'd like to study Lionel Dahmer too. He was an interesting dynamic between the father and son there. So,
Well, I'll have to check that out as well. Uh,
yeah.
well, how can we support you besides going to the consult? And I know that you've got some swag at on your website as well.
Yeah, on our website, truecrimeconsult.com, because the consult was already taken when we signed up. Unfortunately, I don't know if it's a scam. Somebody tried to sell me the consult domain for a lot of money. And I'm like, I'll
That's
stick
just
with
so
what I
laughable.
I'm like, I think might be a scam. I'm not gonna bite. Yeah, but if you go to our website, truecrimeconsult.com, we've got some merch there. And really support us to just listen. That's all I ask. We have a Patreon, patreon.com/the consult pod. We also have a Facebook fan page called Unsubs, and it was created by fans for fans of the consult, where our listeners can discuss our episodes and other true crime topics. And I have to say, it is a great group of people that have joined. One of the things that is just really important to me is that we, the true crime community, much to my um I guess just disappointment, can be very vitriolic. And I didn't quite realize that until I retired and started doing the podcast. And so I appreciate our unsubs group where, yeah, we have their discussions amongst listeners, and, some of the listeners that disagree with our assessments or have other theories. But it's just always a really respectful and interesting back and forth on there. So I do really appreciate it. But that's really important to me, to maintain a professionalism amongst people who disagree, because that's one of the things in the BAU. We didn't always agree, and yet we still have to be colleagues. We still have to work together. We have to respect one another. And I hope that our show demonstrates that as well, and that the listeners that we have understand that. So anyway, I'm just really proud of the group. I think it's a great group of people that have joined Unsubs. And so if anyone wants to join, it's a lot of fun.
Yeah, that's great. And
Yeah.
you're right that people can get really nasty in those chat groups, especially when you talk about sensitive cases. Like the worst that I've seen is John Bonet. When
Yeah.
I did an episode on that, and it was like, this person's an idiot, and you get on. I mean, they
Was
get the
that me?
squabbles.
Because I came on and we talked
Yeah,
about
they
John Bonet.
actually.
Oh, I know.
Yeah, one person was like, and I wanted to respond back. I was actually talking with Jason about this, and he was like, "Don't do it." I was-
Oh,
but
I'm very well
yeah, I
aware
mean,
of
they get
that.
very
We took a lot
nasty.
of, yes, they do. It's baffling to me. It's,
And I
but
I
it's
do.
similar. Like, we were talking about Liz's, people in Liz's group. It makes no sense.
Right.
Why would people get upset? It's the same thing in true crime where, we're not the investigators. We don't know everything in the case. We don't, how come people think they know more than maybe what the investigators do? And so how come you get so upset and disagree with people? I don't understand that. It doesn't make any sense, and I don't have any time for it. You can tell me you disagree with me, but you do it in a respectful way. Don't call me names. And but yeah, we've done a few cases, and I'm shocked by how people responded. Just like, what are you doing with your life that you felt you had to sit down and write this kind of email to somebody you don't even know?
Right.
Just
And these are like long emails sometimes too,
sometimes, yeah,
explaining like why you're such an idiot. And it's like, all right,
yeah,
I know I'm
yeah,
not supposed
or
to be reading this anyway, but and the reason why I do read them is you do have people who will make good comments or bring up good points. One of the shows that gets a lot of attention on my channel is the Yuba County shows, and I've always got some really good opinions and theories from people, and I like having that back and forth and kicking things around with cases like that. That's fun for me and entertaining, and also I think valuable to just bring up new ideas or new ways of thinking. I'm great with that. So if people want to comment on this episode, please do it. Just do it in a respectful way. Please do not call us
I have thick
names.
skin. I mean,
Yeah.
at my age, but I think it baffles me that people feel the need to, I see so many things I disagree with. I don't have time. Like, it doesn't matter to me. It doesn't, and it doesn't matter if somebody wants to write and say they disagree with me, but I don't understand, the name calling and the
Well,
attacks on, my experience. I mean, like, it's
yeah.
kind of tough to attack
Do one on
that,
Karen Reed as well. That would be the other top one. If you do one on Karen Reed, I
I
promise
no,
you, you're gonna have
I need to
people.
recuse myself from that. I have a conflict of interest, so I'm not going to do it. And I'm not really interested in that case.
Yeah.
It's not behaviorally interesting to me. So, but I do, have, a conflict, so I have to just stay out of it. Otherwise, anything I were to say about it, it would be probably considered bias. So, I mean, I'm called biased anyway, and I don't have any connection to some cases, but so that is not what I'm going to do.
Well, I appreciate the work that you do, and I love hearing your show. I listen to it all the time, sincerely, and I'm looking forward to the Dahmer episodes. But thank you again. If you want to support me, you can like and subscribe to Santana True Crime. You can leave us a nice comment telling us what a great show this was and your theory or question on the case. You can also support me by buying my book, A Murder on Campus, The Professor, the Cop, in North Carolina's Most Notorious Cold Case. I wrote that with my brother, Dr. Brian Santana. Julia, thank you again, and good night.